Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I'm Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Moore. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, just when you thought it was safe to get back in the water, we have to do more. Buckeyes entering the transfer portal. Thought, well, certainly we must be done with these shows. The portal's closing in just a couple of days. No. Two more. Ohio State defensive linemen entering the transfer portal. And this feels kind of like, if you're trying to explain the transfer portal and who goes in the transfer portal to someone, outside of the guys who are getting, lured in there for a big payday, these are kind of the two profiles of the kind of guys who go in the transfer portal.
Yeah, and that is Joshua Mickens, defensive end, and Trajen Odom, the latest two defensive tackle. And Odom, I think, played maybe one or two games this past season, didn't play many snaps. Joshua Mickens, I think, actually played 7 or 8 games, but was never in the rotation in any meaningful way as a third-year guy. And he was one of the guys that I think if you took a draft of the guys most likely to transfer, Joshua Mickens would have been up there because it just hasn't happened for him in his time at Ohio State. And now he'll go and be able to find somewhere, and Trajen Odom the same. So two more guys out of the room, and they're not able to replace all of the guys that they're losing. But in terms of replacing Joshua Mickens, I feel like that will be done, Tom, with Episatanale, Kari Wilder, the young guys, because he was already passed by Zion Grady, true freshman this past year. There's really no way to expect him to keep from being passed by other talented young players. So for Joshua Mickens, this makes the absolute most sense in the world.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the snap counts from last year, and Episatanale, they intentionally only played him in 4 games so that he could take a red shirt. But at the point that he was, that they cut off his time on the field, he played the same number of snaps as Joshua Mickens in the Illinois game and played more snaps than him in the Ohio game. Now we're talking like 4-3 and 2-2, but this is someone who is pretty clearly, as a true freshman who was out there, already jumping someone who'd been there for a couple of years. That that was not a hard one to read in terms of where things were probably stood there. And Mickens is someone who is talented enough that he can go play somewhere in FBS and be a contributing player. It just at some point, once you get through a couple of years, if you're not trending in the right direction, it probably is time to at least think about going somewhere else. And he's someone who might have been, he may have been someone who, if the post-spring portal was still there, it's worth sticking it out and seeing how things develop in the spring, because the picture in the defensive line room has changed quite a bit over the course of this offseason. So, maybe it's worth sticking it out. But now that there's not a post-spring portal, you're committing to another 12 months if you choose not to transfer right now. And, that you get to a point where that's not necessarily a risk you're willing to take with your career.
So Ohio State now, in terms of defensive ends transferring, Joshua Mickens, CJ Hicks, Logan George, Dominic Kirks, just to name a few. Quite a few, actually. And then with Trajen Odom, played the fewest snaps among the defensive tackles this year. Now, that doesn't count Maxwell Roy, the classmate who didn't play at all. Odom played in 3 games, 10 total snaps. He is the final defensive tackle of the 2025 class to now transfer out, joining Jarquez Carter, who ended up at Miami. And then you had Maxwell Roy end up at UCLA, I believe. And so if that's an indication of where these guys can end up, Trajen Odom's like, well, why not me as well? And go find somewhere where you have maybe a better path towards playing time. And talking to Larry Johnson about these guys last year, one of the bowl games, maybe last year in Dallas, and he mentioned Trajen being the project of the group, but sometimes Larry Johnson loves projects because it's just like this block of granite that you can form into whatever you want. And so that's what he had in Trajen Odom, and didn't last, and now he's off somewhere else, and he now becomes, so with Maxwell Roy, Trajen Odom, Jarquez Carter, Eric Mensah, 4 defensive tackles transferring out. That doesn't include the one graduating in Tywone Malone or one turning pro early, Caden McDonald. But they've addressed this in the portal and certainly through recruiting, but I'm not expecting any of the 2026 freshman defensive tackles to work their way into a rotation this year.
No, I think the offensive line and the interior of the defensive line are the two spots where you really don't ever assume you're going to get anything out of a true freshman. And then if you do, it's this wonderful, pleasant surprise. It doesn't happen very often because, yes, there's all the normal considerations that go into the adjustment to college and why that's so challenging, jumping from high school level to college level, and all of the classes and all of the adjustments to living on your own and all that kind of stuff. But also, especially for those linemen, the adjustment to a college strength program. Like you generally put on a ton of good weight, good muscle weight. Sometimes you're losing a lot of bad weight that first year of college, kind of the opposite of the traditional college experience. But for linemen, it's a lot of that sort of, building up that strength, because going up against guys you're going up against in high school, a lot of those guys are going to college for something other than sports. If you're going into the Big Ten, you're playing all the guys who were the best at their high school, probably the best in their county. And that's a real adjustment. Offensive linemen and really, I think defensive tackles kind of go in this exact same bucket. The first year, you assume you're going to get absolutely nothing. And the second year, you assume maybe you can work yourself into a rotation. That's sort of what my expectation would be for the 2026 class, which I think is indicative of why Ohio State went into the portal to bring in a couple of defensive tackles. They brought one in from UCF, one in from Alabama, Walker and Smith. And those guys are both people who are going to be immediate impact guys for Ohio State. And I think when you look at things from the perspective of a Trajen Odom, I think you can look at, it's the Will Smith looking around the empty Fresh Prince house gif where it's just like, well, everything's gone. No, everyone I came in with is not here anymore. Along with, the guy who was a year ahead of them, Eric Mensah. So there's really not a whole lot left in that room in terms of guys that he would know. And also they also brought in a couple guys who are going to jump ahead of you on the depth chart. So, you may have thought, okay, well, now things may be opening up to a role, and then you bring in a couple guys, and now it's very clear that no, they are not expecting you to do a whole heck of a lot, or not to really be an impact rotational player. And do you want to go sit out another year, or do you want to follow in the footsteps of the guys who, were your peers and who went and probably got a decent amount of money to go play for, UCLA is splashing some cash this offseason. And, so you would figure Maxwell Roy is probably doing okay for himself and has a clearer path to the playing field there. And you can certainly see why that would be appealing.
Yeah, 100%. And you go find a cleaner path to playing time and also make more money while you're doing it. And as the conversations become more and more no sugar added into these conversations between players and coaches and GMs, it becomes more and more of a business. And so when the players are operating it as a business, the coaches are going to do the same. And then you just have to either accept it or find a new place of business. And I think that's what's going on there as well. So there you go. Joshua Mickens out, Trajen Odom out, and we'll see how their careers go from here on out. And it's always interesting to see where they land, so to see what other programs think of them as well. But the real test is then, what do they do at that program? And it's like, well, did Ohio State let one get away, or did were they like completely okay with it? And so that we'll figure that out in time. So there you go. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and hit the thumbs up. We'd appreciate that. 5-star rating and review, always appreciate it as well on the podcast side. And you can continue to find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Thank you all for tuning in, and we'll talk to you all later.